Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. Lovely to have so many of you with us this early on in January. Welcome back to those who've joined us before, and a huge welcome to those who are new and haven't on before. I'm just going to go through and mute a couple of people who aren't yet on mute. So, my name's Matt Baird. I am the founder and host of the Social Housing Roundtable. We've been running this now for about 4 years or so. Really over the last kind of 2.5 years is where it's taken off, and I'm hugely grateful to everyone who's able to join one of the 54 sessions that we ran last year. We're probably going to match that again this year, so do keep an eye out for everything that's being put together. I want to say a massive thank you first and foremost to Alertacall, who are sponsoring today's session. Alertacall are I'm a huge advocate for their work. If you don't know them, please go check them out. I've got one of their tablets just on the side here as well. We've been working together for about 9 months now. We're going to be working together till at least March, and I'm saying at least because I'm waiting to see what happens next. But a massive thank you for them for A, sponsoring this session today, B, being our token sponsor for the year, and C, for introducing us to Rachel, who's going to be our guest speaker for today. To those who don't know me, so the reason this was founded was because I truly, genuinely believe the only way that the social housing space is going to change and improve is when we bring people together to actually have conversations around what's going wrong and what needs to change. Because I think anybody thinking it doesn't need to change is probably, unfortunately, a bit naive. And that was born from my recruitment experience in housing. So I've been recruiting in social housing for the last 13 years. That recruitment is what keeps this free for everybody. The reason it's constantly available to you all for free, the reason that the YouTube channel runs and everything else that goes on, we don't make any money from it, but it's something that we're hugely passionate about. But anybody who needs recruitment support, if you are looking for help, please do reach out. It's that keeps this running, and I'd like to hope that knowing that it's going towards something other than just huge CEO pockets would be would be at least a bit beneficial. So on to today. I've already mentioned, so Rachel Holliday, who I'm going to pass across to in just a second, is our key speaker for today. We're going to be talking everything homelessness, lived experience, and truly why it isn't just down to waiting for big councils or big local authorities to fix the homelessness problem. That isn't going to happen, and what we can do as individuals to really make an impact. So without further ado, Rachel, I'll pass over to you to do introductions, and I'll start trying to do your presentation from here.
Oh, thanks so much, Matt. That's great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm incredibly nervous. I was just saying to Matt, I've not done a presentation in probably over a year. So, and I'm afraid I'm not a polished speaker either, so I do read off my notes. So yeah, and so I'm going to just really share with you my journey into and out of homelessness and talk a bit about my project. And then at the end, there'll be lots of time to have discussions and questions, etc., and things like that. So Matt, just let me know when you want me to start. I did see my slide then, by the way, and then it went.
Yeah, that's what this is why I don't do the slide sharing usually.
I can't do it. That's why I said we shouldn't do slides, because I'm terrible at it as well. But
and hopefully we're up and running.
Right, that's it. Great. Okay, so if you go to the first slide, Matt. Brilliant. Okay. Right, everyone. I had a great childhood growing up. I was brought up on the beautiful village of Moresby Parks in Whitehaven, Cumbria. My mum and dad are two of the most wonderful people you could ever meet. I loved primary school, and I always thought I was quite clever. But when I got to secondary school, this all changed. I wasn't deemed as being very bright. I was placed in the bottom sets for most of my subjects, and this was called Set 3. Around the age of 12, I was subject to a serious sexual assault by a stranger. I managed to struggle and run away, but at the time I believed it was my own fault, and I didn't tell any adults because I felt really ashamed. So I learned a lot in Set 3 at Whitehaven School. I learned how to smoke, I learned how to swear, and I learned how to forge my mum's signature on absence slips so I could get out of all the lessons that I really hated. I was told by my teacher that I would never amount to anything. I was called disruptive and an airy-fairy daydreamer. And in my end-of-year report, it said Rachel won't get anywhere in life while she constantly challenges everything that she is told. After the attack, my life took a turn for the worse, and I became really angry at the world. By the age of 15, I began drinking alcohol and I left home. My parents were beside themselves with worry, and they had no idea how to reach out to the person that I had become. Things went from bad to worse, and by the age of 19, I'd become addicted to drugs. Slide. By this point in my life, I'd moved to Manchester, but with no money and a drug habit, I eventually became homeless. I was never street homeless. I was what is known as a sofa surfer, and that's someone who goes from place to place with nowhere safe of their own to live. I was admitted into a drug rehabilitation centre, and the support worker warned me that if I didn't have somewhere safe to live, away from drugs, I wouldn't manage to stay clean. I didn't listen, and when I left, I had nowhere safe to go. I went back to the places where people were using drugs, and I quickly relapsed once again. I tried to get work, but I just didn't seem to be able to hold down a job. Drugs came first. I lost friends, boyfriends, and all of my possessions. When you are so far down that road, death is of no concern, and I didn't really care if I lived or died. The year 2000 came round, and finally, aged 20, I did not know where I was going to sleep that night. Downtrodden from a vicious cycle of drug abuse and increasing mental health problems, I found a payphone. I reversed the call charge to my mum and asked for her to take me back. My mum and dad were over the moon to hear from me and put the money into my bank so I could get a bus home. But coming home was so difficult. I was a failure. I had no money, no job, and no qualifications. It wasn't long before I found myself a waitressing job, which I loved, and things seemed to be looking up. A few weeks into my new job, I started to feel really unwell, and to my horror and despair, I discovered I was pregnant. I broke the news to my parents, feeling like the worst person to walk the earth. My dad said that he would break the news to my nana, and we would get through it together. Next slide. So, my nana, Elsie Holliday. Elsie Holliday brought up 7 children on her own when her husband, aged 34, was killed at Hague Pit in a mining accident. My nana was one of those people that just radiates love. My nana never complained and had a natural ability to value the best things in life that were free. As a child growing up, I remember her showing me how to grow strawberries in her garden. She taught me how to play cards and always made me feel like I was the most special person in her life, as I'm sure she did with all the rest of the family too. My parents went to see my nana to tell her the news that I was pregnant, and my nana replied, "Hallelujah! God has blessed our Rachel with a baby. How wonderful that he has saved her life." Next slide. Now, I am atheist, but Dylan, my son, did save my life. I never went back to a life of drugs and chaos. And well, I found a home. I had wonderful support from our local Howgill Family Centre. I learned how to look after my son properly and be a good mum to him. I had an amazing lone parent advisor at the job centre who told me that I can do it. But she said in order for you to get a job, you need to get some qualifications. She suggested I attended the local college and take a night class. At the same time, I started voluntary work at the local Citizens Advice Bureau. I attended night class at Lakes College and studied A-level law alongside typing skills. I passed my RSA typing qualifications, and to everyone's amazement, I gained an A in A-level law. Due to the amazing support I received, by the year 2002, I found full-time work as a legal secretary, and I've been in work ever since. So with the help of Bank of Mum and Dad, I passed my driving test, and then I saved up money for a deposit and bought my very own home. I even did my own conveyancing. The years passed by, my son went to school, and life was great. One day, I was reading in the local newspaper, and I saw an advert for a job working for a charity providing support to homeless people in my area. I applied for the job and was accepted for a position of support worker. And well, what an eye-opener. Hundreds of people in West Cumbria who were just like me, with nowhere safe of their own to live. And I thought, this is terrible. Someone needs to open a homeless hostel. I mean, how hard can that be, right? At the time, we had 1.4 million empty properties in the UK, with 400,000 hidden homeless people. 70,000 of those buildings were owned by the government, costing all of us money to keep them shut. So the solution: we take an empty government building, we secure £500,000 of grant funding, and we build the most beautiful homeless hostel that we have ever seen. But not everyone was sold on the idea. Our local newspaper heard about my idea and ran an article about it, which was front page news. The headline said, "Prisoner hostel to open." I was asked to arrange a public meeting with local residents to discuss my idea and plans, and I thought, well, this is a great opportunity, and once I explain my idea to people, they will understand. Next slide. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people did not take too kindly to my idea, and people shouted at me, "We don't want it." A gentleman at the back shouted, "You want shot," to which everyone clapped and cheered. I always remember the words of a lady sat at the front of the meeting. She shouted, "People like you can't do things like this. People like you cannot do things like this." And those words stung and hurt. And I never forget how it felt to be standing there, a young girl, on my own, in front of all these angry people, being told that people like me can't do things. I had a meeting with a local authority and a national charity who told me, Rachel, these things take 7 to 10 years to come to fruition, so don't leave your day job. And the next day, I left my day job. Next slide. My social enterprise, Time to Change West Cumbria project, was set up on 20th of June 2013 without a penny in the bank. With support from Cumbria Social Enterprise Partnership, I secured funding to develop a business plan. I then started writing grant funding applications, and the first one I wrote was to Francis C. Scott Charitable Trust. I asked them for £5,000. They awarded me £15,000, and this photo here is of me opening the letter with the cheque in it. Once I had this, I contacted the Police and Crime Commissioner of Cumbria at the time, Mr. Richard Rhodes, to secure a 25-year lease for £1 a year peppercorn rent on an old police station in Egremont that was no longer in use. It was already costing the taxpayer £17,000 a year to keep the building closed. Next slide. To convert the police station into 11 rooms of ensuite accommodation, it was going to cost £363,000. I was only given an 8-month window to raise the money I needed, and I was told it just couldn't be done. I filled in application after application for funding, working day and night, and finally we secured the money we needed to build Calderwood House Homeless Hostel. And here's a photo of me in the prison cell before it was knocked through. The irony. Next slide. This lease was signed on the 28th of February 2015, and the doors of Calderwood House Homeless Hostel was opened by the Police and Crime Commissioner, Mr. Richard Rhodes, on the 1st of October 2015. To date, we have had over 400 homeless people through our doors. We employ 9 local people, many of whom have had first-hand experience of homelessness, mental health illness, and drug and alcohol addiction. We are staffed with waking staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. During the planning of Calderwood House, I decided to have a barista coffee machine installed in the hostel, and this way residents could train in barista, and we could also open the doors to the public to serve fresh coffee. Then I thought, well, what if we had our very own blend of coffee? One that you couldn't get anywhere else in the world, only from our homeless hostel, and every bag sold puts a roof over the head of the homeless. Calderwood House coffee is roasted here in Whitehaven, and we sell it throughout our local supply chain. And it's not just the locals who enjoy our coffee. Next slide. It's also the Royals. A month or so after we opened the doors to Calderwood House, I received a letter which I actually thought was a scam. The letter said, you have been nominated for Cumbria Woman of the Year. And I just thought, yeah, right, you've got to put your money in someone's bank account. So I rang the phone number on the letter and they said, no, this is a genuine award and we run it every year and you have been nominated. It's at the Laura Ashley Hotel in Windermere in Cumbria. So I did some digging and I found a lady who'd already been awarded this award. And she said to me, what happens is you walk in and if you've won it, they'll give you the nod so you can prepare yourself. So I thought, right, great. So the day came, I went through, I walked into the Laura Ashley Hotel and there was no nod. So I thought, well, that's fine. That's great. I had a lovely day. And when it came to the awards, a lady got up on the stage and started talking. And she said, this award is to go to a young lady who's opened a homeless hostel in Cumbria. And I was literally thinking, no way, someone in Cumbria has done exactly the same thing as me. But it was actually me that won the award. So I got up full of tears. And I remember it was a lady called Val who was there from BBC Radio Cumbria. Before you do, please can I ring my mum? So she said, yeah. So I rang my mum quickly. I said, Mum, I've won. And she said, what have you won? I said, I'm Cumbria Woman of the Year. And my mum said, well, I've called you some things in your time last, but that was never one of them. And that is a true story. That's your mum to keep you grounded. So anyway, next slide. I'm standing here today as Cumbria Woman of the Year to tell you that people like me can do things like this. People like me do things like this, but with people like you to support me and to hold my hand along the way. And in that, I'll include James Batchelor from Alertacall, who's been an incredible support and mentor to me. So finally, I would now like to finish off by telling you a story about a woman whose words inspire me. Next slide. Harriet Tubman was born in 1822 into a family of black slaves in Maryland, America. Harriet and her family were owned by their master. Harriet was beaten and whipped almost daily, which resulted in a severe head injury, and she developed epilepsy. A disabled black slave was no good to her master, so he tried to sell her, but nobody wanted her. And Harriet knew if she stayed, she was surely going to be killed. In the middle of the night, Harriet planned to escape. Harriet travelled over 90 miles on foot through the night following the Northern Star. And finally, she made it to Philadelphia, where slavery had been abolished. Harriet began her new life in the Promised Land. Harriet found work and somewhere to live, but she often thought about those that she left behind. And Harriet decided she must return, risking her own life to rescue her family. But Harriet did not stop there. Back and forth through the night over many years, Harriet led hundreds of black slaves to their freedom. And Harriet said this. Next slide. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. And always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. And I'd now like to share with you a short film about Calderwood House. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Firstly, a massive thank you. I can see the emotion already coming through. I'm now going to try and share a video for the first time I've ever tried to do this, so I'm going to do my best. I realise I definitely should have tried to do this in the preview, but we will make it work. So I've got video. So how do I share that? Let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. So hopefully you can see the video. And
nobody's born into our community wanting to be a homeless heroin addict or a homeless ex-school teacher or a homeless police officer. Nobody's born thinking that one day they'll end up in a place like this. And most people who come through the door just say to me, I never thought this would ever happen to me. It can happen to anybody. The old thought processes we had in West Cumbria was there are no homeless people, or any homeless people that we do have, they've got themselves into that position. It's their own fault. They don't deserve another chance.
I'm originally from Whitehaven. At the time I was working full time, I was doing 50 hours a week. I lost my mum about 3 years ago, and from there things sort of spiralled, as I was in a really, really bad place.
People from around here would say, Rachel, I've seen a homeless person, and got in touch with her, and she came looking. I was in between Tesco's and like a mound right on the seafront, which I loved because they opened the tent and you had the sea view. It was beautiful.
I was on my own and I tried to take it all on my own, and I just couldn't do it. And you feel like you've got nowhere to turn to.
Even now, in the climate that we've got, it can happen to more people than we'd ever thought it ever would. So what we need is somewhere safe for those people to come to.
There's not only people on the streets from drugs and whatnot. It could be a breakdown in marriage, family issues, money issues.
I sort of lost my identity. When you lose your identity, you lose your voice, so you always tend to take a bit of a back seat. Where here now, you're heard, it's like you count for something, which is, I suppose, what a homeless place is for as well. It's to get yourself heard, to get yourself back into the community.
What people need, they need to know that they're wanted, that they're cared for, and that they're welcome here.
Put yourself in their shoes. That's what people want, someone to listen.
Time to Change was originally the social enterprise that we set up, and Calderwood House was the name that we give to the homeless hostel. The reason I called it Time to Change was time to change people's ideas and outdated beliefs on poverty and homelessness, and I believe it was time for us all as a community to address these issues together. We now employ 22 people across Time to Change. We have wonderful staff and now our outreach service as well.
I absolutely love the fact that we've got the capability now to be able to offer outreach support. The people who are moving from here into the community, we're trying to give them that pillar of support so when they do move on, they're not alone.
We must just keep trying to move people through from Calderwood into their own homes, stabilising their new tenancies and bringing other people in, but it's certainly not getting any quieter for us.
Would you rather see people on the streets, or would you rather have a place like this where they can get off the street, make something of themselves?
When I leave here, I want to be able to move forward and get back to where I was 3-4 years ago. And I feel this place is definitely one of them places to do that.
What we've proved with Calderwood House is that everybody's a human being.
I've just gone from a shell back to a person. It's given me self-pride back, where I could do something. I could walk down the street and hold my head up high.
Coming in here was absolute godsend. It helped me change my life around immensely.
Without this, we'd be lost.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I mean, you can see from the comments and everything immediately, people are truly inspired. And I think it was fascinating when obviously I've heard you speak before, and when we were talking before around what we wanted to discuss today, there is that hugely inspirational story. There's the amazing work that's gone on. There's the truly life-changing events that have taken place. But there's also the other element, and you touched on it in your presentation along the lines of, if we're looking at, I guess, a little bit clinically, we can't rely on local authorities and on housing alone to fix these problems. It requires people stepping up and going, okay, well, what can I do? How did you, I guess, find that process in terms of trying to, obviously you've mentioned there that the immediate pushback, it reminded me, unfortunately, of some work I've done with, and I'm trying to be mindful of how to phrase it, there was a pushback from a residential area that I know on even now setting up a refugee centre. We don't want those kind of people around here and all that kind of stuff. And I know housing providers have been horrified by what they're hearing from their own tenants. Does it still get pushback now? And how are people kind of responding when they hear your story going, well, you might have been able to do it, but that doesn't mean I can, I guess?
I think the support for me came from our housing options team at Copeland Borough Council. And when they had wanted a homeless hostel for a long, long time, but they just weren't able to do it on their own. So they also brought in the leader at the time. Her name was Elaine Woodburn, and she had no idea actually that the extent of the homeless issue that we were facing. And she just got behind it, and from them getting behind it, and then the funders and then other community organisations. So obviously the first place that we went to pitch the idea was met with horror. But again, I was totally inexperienced and I had no idea how to manage PR and newspapers and all of that. The whatever news rang me, I just told them all about it. I didn't understand what was really happening. And those people that were shouting at me in that meeting, they were just afraid and they were frightened. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think, looking back, it could have been handled a lot better. So this second site, we did a bit more consultation. And yeah, I think we had 9 objections at planning. But then Richard Rhodes, the Police and Crime Commissioner, said his office were getting phone calls daily, protesting about the plans. He said, but from the day one that we opened the doors, there wasn't one phone call. And he said, and I deduced from that it works. So we've been open 10 years this year, 400 people through the doors. And yeah, a handful of issues, as you do with anything, but certainly nowhere near the issue you get with a Wetherspoons or a Tesco's or anything, or a Boots pharmacy. We've got 24 hours of staff on. The model that we've got, because the building only costs me £1 a year, I sponsor out all the bedrooms to community organisations and throughout the supply chain. So all that money comes in and the rents. And so it funds itself, really. We're not commissioned by anybody. But I'm rattling on here anyway. So how did I find it? When I was younger, I told you that my school teacher had said I was disruptive and I was challenging. And I kind of took that stubbornness and changed it into something a bit more positive. Like I just would not have it that I was being told no. And then once we got it over the line and it worked, it must say it worked a hell of a lot better than I thought it ever would. Now we've got it, it's a blueprint, and I'm more than happy for anyone out there to take my business plan, my funders, contact details, whatever, and say, let's do it in our area.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you look at where you're located, people think of Cumbria. A lot of people go, oh, the Lake District is beautiful, it's wealthy, there's money, there's everything else. They don't think of unfortunately, the poverty and the stories like what's been shared, and that even businesses like yours have to exist if we're going to overcome it. And I'll bring Brian in just a moment, but if anyone else would like to jump in, I'm going to go to a couple of points in the chat and then bring in Brian. But if anyone else would like to chat, please do raise your hand. But Rachel, just on that point, people don't think of the Lake District and the areas like yours as having high levels of poverty and homelessness.
Yeah, we live in West Cumbria, terrible levels of deprivation and poverty. We've got the same housing crisis as everywhere else. You know, I've got a guy who's been in my hostel for nearly 2 years. That's disgraceful. But just trying to find appropriate accommodation for moving people through is a real challenge.
I was going to say that was going to be where the point I've jotted down was on that move on accommodation. You mentioned it in the video there. The aspiration is always to get people into their own homes.
Yeah.
How difficult is that, particularly in an area like yours?
More and more challenging, you know, and we just don't have the social housing we used to have, and all the supported accommodation, like the Turning Points of the world, Richmond Fellowship. We used to have quite a lot of options of moving people on into longer term supported accommodation, and they all seem to have gone. Private rents, we're all priced out the market for private rents now. None of our clients can afford a private rent, even though we're in Copeland, we've got the cheapest house prices in the whole of the UK. We still can't get people into private lets, especially like young lads under the age of 35.
Goodness me. Brian, I'm going to bring you in and then I'll go to some of the points being raised in the chat. Good to have you with us today.
Good morning. Really inspirational, Rachel. Absolutely fantastic to listen to you. I'm sitting here, and you mentioned a figure during what you were talking about, which was 1.4 million empty properties,
Yeah.
and the homeless figure. It's indicative of what has been going on for quite a long time, where local authorities are not-for-profit organizations and providing social housing. You have a lot of organizations like housing associations who are looking at the bottom line and not necessarily looking at the social impact of what they're doing. It's like, and I'm taking this from Alistair McIntosh, who some people may know, is putting boots on the ground and having people in the communities who are there to help and support. And having that, I hate the term social housing, partly because so many of the providers are not necessarily social businesses. They are businesses who are there with a bottom line. They've got to pay back banks. They've got to pay back major institutions who want their slice of the cake before anything else happens. And I think that whole social ethos of being there, supporting, helping, is gone from organizations, including some local authorities, where they don't have the resources. They have the responsibility, but not necessarily the resources.
If I couldn't put 24-hour waking staff, trained waking staff into that hostel, I wouldn't run it. That is my bottom line. And any time now and then, you know, we all get funding issues, and every now and then they'll say, well, Rachel, we've been funding you a long amount of time now. I say, well, what's the alternative? I said, because we're not having security on, and I'm not leaving 10 vulnerable people in a hostel by themselves. I said, so that's the bottom line. If we want this facility for the whole of the community, not just for the homeless people going in there, this is for benefits everybody. If we're going to have it for everybody and benefit our local communities, then we have to staff it properly, and it has to be funded properly.
And I think this is it, isn't it? It's that continual narrative of how we can possibly afford to do it, because it's, when you look at, you know, even the increased minimum wage and things like that, trying to, the money that should be given to support workers compared to what we can actually pay in the sector is appalling. And there's a couple of my colleagues from Spire House on the call with me today. We've been recruiting support workers between us for 10, 15 years. And yet trying to find them now is harder than ever, because we don't have the funding that deserves the role that it's being paid for. And I imagine you're finding this as well, Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, we live on the doorstep of Sellafield nuclear facility. Okay. So we've got like a supply chain whereby social impact and social value is placed a lot of importance on them. So they have to be seen to working with the community in order to win contracts Sellafield, which has been vital to all the third sector around an hour. You know, we're like an hour away from the nearest motorway. So we're in quite, you know, really isolated where we are. But I do find that the supply chain have been absolutely fantastic. But also the Police and Crime Commissioner having that vision of saying, all right, we'll give you the building for free. You maintain it, and if you don't do what you're going to say, Rachel, then we're going to take it back off you. So that's been great as well. And I think there's quite a lot of short-sightedness with other empty government buildings, because you think, well, we'll sell it and, you know, we'll make money now, or we'll rent it out to somebody else for like 30 grand a year. But actually, if you look at our model, I think it saves the public purse a heck of a lot of money. If you think of all our complex needs clients that would be attending A&E 6 times more likely than anybody else, the people that will be in prison right now, you know, all that stuff. It's a really worthwhile model, I think, that what we've got running here.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely couldn't agree more. This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertacall. Alertacall helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertacall's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertacall works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertacall won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024. A couple of points I'm just going to raise from the chat. So Lauren had said, I just had to jump on this one. Amazing organisation on my doorstep. Well done, Rachel and the team. I'll have to come and visit. It's great to hear.
Anytime, I'll drop my email in for you. Is it Lauren?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll drop my email in and then you can, come along. I'll give you the tour.
Fantastic. Kim has said inspiration, strength and passion, 3 words that come to mind. Thank you, Rachel. Truly thank you for sharing your story and being the voice for Time to Change. An advocate for anyone who finds themselves seeking support, pulling away from the stigma that hangs over homelessness. I think that's an absolutely imperative point that's been made there. And Alex said, well done in all you've done. I know I've been close to homelessness several times before due to divorce, poor health and my own destructive coping mechanisms. Well done on your work. Emma's asked a question. So Emma's with us from Alertacall today. Can you tell us a bit more about how you help your residents move into the community and how long that normally takes? Because evidently we've talked about, you know, the lack of move on accommodation when it does happen.
Yeah.
That isn't just a great, here's the keys and away you go, is it?
Yeah, no. So originally we said 3 months maximum to get people through the hostel and into their own accommodation. That's getting longer and longer as we're struggling to get find social housing or affordable housing for people moving through. But once we do secure some keys or a move on, our outreach worker will get involved. My outreach worker has been with me since day one. She was with me since before we opened the doors. So me and Carla get on extremely well. In fact, I've got quite a low staff turnover. A lot of my staff have been with me a long time. And so what she'll do, she'll take that person to their new home. Most of the guys in the hostel will come and help decorate it. We'll source carpets and stuff, but we've also got an emergency fund that we raise money for. So if we need white goods, tables, chairs, all that sort of stuff, because people's environment is everything. We can't just have them moving into a blank canvas with no carpets or heating on. Like that just doesn't work. They should be moving into somewhere where they feel comfortable and they feel happy to wake up in the morning in their own bed. So that's our aspiration, to make sure that everyone's home is a home for life. But that outreach will continue for as long as they want it. So they can come back and come back at Christmas dinner. They come back for Sunday lunch. We've got an allotment that they take part in. We go to play cricket on the beach. Like they're just part of this, what we call like the Colwood family. Sounds fluffy and everything, but everyone needs someone to love. And we talk about love a lot at the hostel, and it's quite often you'll be walking through the hostel and you hear someone go, I love you, Neil, I love you, lass, you know, and I really quite I promote that amongst my staff and my residents, because one thing that none of us can survive without is love. Well, we might survive, but we won't live. So yeah.
You know, I'm seeing some of the points there from Joe. It's amazing to think they're now disruptive innovators charging for their work. Fantastic work, Rachel, channeling that and not being afraid to challenge it as well. And Joe's mentioned perseverance is key, but it's hard to take the attacks and you need broad shoulders. Something that just came up to me before I go to Barbara's couple of questions she's put in the chat. One of the points that came up a lot last year on the roundtable, conferences and other places is this changing mindset around furnishings. You just mentioned it yourself there, that you found ways to fund it. You found local partners who'll support you and everything else that'll come with it. Yet we're still seeing a lot of housing providers, support providers and others providing that blank slate. You know, we've got you a home, it doesn't have carpets, beds, white goods, anything like that. You might be able to get something, but it's a challenge. And yet it's a big expense for a lot of housing providers who've got a lot of homes. And yet for me, you know, when I've looked at some of the homes I've lived in, if it wasn't furnished, I would have been sleeping on the floor and struggled. Even back when I was in my 20s and I wasn't homeless then, I was just paying the cheapest rent I could find.
Yeah. It's not good enough. It's just not good enough. And we just have to keep calling it out of social landlords who think that that's okay, because most of these social landlords, if we put them into a flat like that where the gas is capped, it's the middle of winter, there's no carpets, there's no curtains, you wouldn't survive. You just wouldn't stay there. You wouldn't be able to sustain it. And why would you want to? So yeah, it's definitely just not good enough. And I would I think there are some good social landlords out there. I met someone who came down to your event, Matt, down in London, who sounded absolutely amazing at what they do, but there's also some that don't do it. And I don't know where the regulation is for these guys to put vulnerable people into, you know, these boxes with nothing in them to help people live.
And unfortunately, there isn't much. And it was, you know, I was hosting the Alertacall event that day, and obviously we worked on it together, which was amazing. But I think when we're looking at the business as a whole and what we can achieve together and what we're trying to collaborate, we're setting people up to fail from day one. And the difference in giving someone a home compared to giving someone a room is huge. And I think you need things to make it a home. Some of the questions that have come through. So, Barbara, amazing and inspirational questions. Amazing and inspirational, some questions. What's the ratio of women to men, and what age ranges do you support?
Yeah, so I'd say we've probably got 2 or 3 women in the hostel at any one time, and the rest will be men. We used to have 11 rooms, but one of those rooms is now used as a management area because we didn't have an office, because I said we didn't need one, but turned out we did. So we've got 10 rooms of ensuite accommodation, and yeah, 2 to 3 women at any one time. And what was the other bit?
Age ranges.
Age ranges, we take over 25, so we've got 2 youth hostels in Whitehaven Town Centre. So normally we won't take anybody under the age of 25 unless they ring me up and they might have a 23, 24-year-old who feels like a big fish in a small pond, and they'll just say, can you take him in? And I'm like, absolutely. And we might get maybe a 26-year-old that we find is actually quite really vulnerable or could do with like a younger age hostel. So sometimes we swap them about, but generally it's over the age of 25. And my oldest resident, he was a veteran, he was 89 years old.
Wow, amazing. And again, the difference to make to his life will have been huge.
Yeah, lovely fella.
Do you work with local authorities, and have any residents been rehomed in a council house, i.e. a home for life?
Yeah, so most of them that move on from us go to like a home group, a social tenancy, and that can be theirs for life, providing they pass the starter tenancy part of it. It's just about keeping people settled in those accommodation and providing that long-term friendship over those years to make sure that they're settled where they are. Our local authority, like it used to be Copeland Borough Council, we've just been amalgamated into Cumberland, but Copeland Borough Council, the housing options team there, are absolutely amazing team. We work so well together. They'll never turn their back on anybody. If they can help someone, they will. And if it's out of their remit, and I can help, then we will. So we've got a really close-knit community when it comes to West Cumbria and homelessness. And I think I hear a lot in our sector that people don't have those relationships with their local authorities. But for me, Calderwood House would not have worked without that support from my local authority.
I know it's a big challenge we've got here in Birmingham because it's so big and so difficult sometimes to navigate that actually there's so many teams you've got to get through to make something happen. Whereas for yourself, obviously, you know where you're going to, you know your points of contact, you can make change, and really advocate for, you know, actually my colleague Kim's on the call today and put out a post recently around, you know, local authorities and merging and maybe reducing size or growing sizes and everything that's going on in that space. It just goes to show if you're too big, you struggle. But if you've got something like yours, but obviously for the amalgamation, you can really make a difference.
Yeah, I say that we're friends, you know, that they're friends to us, we're friends to them. And that's the way that we continue the ethos in the hostel as well. It's not us against them and vice versa. We are friends all together and we all want to make a difference to the lives of these people.
Lauren has put in the chat, supported housing is limited in West Cumbria due to stock acquisition, stock rationalisation by registered providers. Move on accommodation and outreach support is limited due to funding limitations. It's still amazing to see the work Rachel and your team are doing. Your organisation adds so much value to the local community, almost in spite of this. So that's lovely to read. And then Joe had said, NIMBY attitude is a massive blocker for these developments. We've had it with a project which ended up being declined at planning based on absolute lies. It was really hard to stomach. This attitude is not only by local communities, but went right up to committee members. It was absolutely shocking. I think it's a NIMBY is a phrase that means not in my backyard. And the idea being is that we need it, but you can put it elsewhere. Is this something you're seeing, trying to find maybe a slightly delicate way to phrase it? The Lake District as a whole is a very, very kind of white area. In areas it can be quite affluent.
Yeah.
Do you see NIMBYism as a continual problem? Like obviously it was when you were setting up on your own, but do you still see it as anything that kind of gets pushed back in the areas you're working in, or actually, as you mentioned earlier, now that it's set up, is it kind of waned a bit?
Yeah, now that we're set up, we're friends with our neighbours. We work well with them. And honestly, I can count on one hand in the last 12 months when we've had any calls from the police or whatever. We've got a really good CCTV system, 24-hour work staff. We're an abstinence hostel, so although we work with people in recovery, we do drug and alcohol tests to help people keep them safe. I've got lone working staff as well, so we can't take people in who are actively using. So yeah, I think our model works well. I mean, there are homeless hostels across the country. We've all got to admit that aren't run well, and that do cause antisocial behaviour and are probably more destructive to that person's life than helping them. So I think there is a further conversation with us all just saying we should just have them everywhere. Well, actually, it depends who's running it, who it's run by, are they running it for profit, and who's managing it, and are the neighbours being involved in it and looked after? So yeah, I have seen some projects that I've set up and I've thought, I wouldn't want to live near that. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. So that's the way I always see it. Like Colbert House is just up the road from me, and I'd be more than happy to live next door. I mean, I practically live there anyway. So yeah, I think when it's set up by people in the community for the community, rather than it being put into the community by national organisations, I think there needs to just be more local people working together on the ground for these projects. But I can only talk about my small area of the world. I don't live in London or Liverpool.
I think there's a point that's really important there around your lived experience is shaping the way you're delivering the service.
Yeah.
You've mentioned about for-profits, and obviously that there's such a huge national shortage of housing in general that sometimes for-profits are getting involved, and there are one or two that are doing still a good job despite being, but then there's unfortunately an awful lot that aren't. And I think that changing legislation around the Supported Housing Regulation Act, etc., is going to make a huge difference to that. But when we're looking at the sector as a whole, do you feel that lived experience is valued enough as a trait for setting up services, or do you still kind of think that actually there's still that mindset of the person that you faced before, which was people like you can't do this?
Yeah, I think we've still got a long way to go for people with lived experience. Just recently, I was asked for some of my residents to share with their life stories and experiences about the problems that they faced. And when I said, well, are they getting paid for it? No, we've got no money for that. So we're still we're being asked for our opinions, which is great. Are we being valued? I don't really think so, not so much so. And I think there's a lot we can be doing there. But I think the very fact that I lead my organisation, I have done for 10 years, with an open catalogue of what my history was about is really good, because I'd say maybe 20 years ago, that just would not have happened at all. So, yeah.
I remember speaking to a tenant at an event at the end of last year, actually. It's quite an interesting mindset shift that I was trying to kind of deliver with her, which was that she was saying she was going into businesses and talking around what it's like as a tenant on the complaint side and teaching about her experiences and what they've done, because she's a tenant board member. Hate that term. You're a board member or you're not a tenant board member, but regardless. And we talked through the stuff. I said, well, you're aware what you're doing is being a consultant. I said, what do you mean? I was like, well, if you're going in and teaching someone how to improve a service, you're being a consultant in the same way that somebody who's on £500 a day and going in is the same as a consultant. Yeah. But there is that mindset, and I completely agree with you, unfortunately, from registered providers, from some execs, from some businesses, from people in general life, that don't see that knowledge as useful in the same way they do as someone who's worked their way up through and got a master's in whatever, and then can come in and say exactly the same thing, but will say it with a different accent or with a different appearance or whatever it'll be. And so I love the fact that you're pushing back, going, well, why aren't they being paid? Because you should be if you're consulting for a company.
Yeah.
There's a question here from Patrick. Thank you very much for today, Rachel. Are you linked well to hospital discharge and prison release schemes as well to prevent and reduce homelessness? So what's your relationship like with those?
Yeah, so our local prison is Havrig Prison down in Milham Way. But further from that, the one that we normally use is Durham. So it's totally out of Cumbria. And we've got a real challenge there, because when the lads come out of Durham Prison, anybody that's Newcastle based or has that postcode can get the support, but from Cumbria they don't. So we're still in this position whereby people are being discharged from prison, ending up coming over turn up at probation offices expecting somewhere to stay and that not being in place. We are getting better at it, and we've got some good links with probation. I personally don't really have any links within the prison itself. Our female prison is Law Newton, and again, similar, it's out of Cumbria. But we are working on a new project called Safe Haven, and that'll be 12 units of self-contained accommodation for women only. What I realised was, after we set up, that women's issues in homelessness are very much different from men's, and putting women into the same hostel as men isn't always the best thing to do. So that's our next project. But I've just had that costed at £1.8 million. So I thought £363,000 was loads of money to raise. I don't know where I'm going to get 1.8 million from, but yeah.
If you do that in under 6 months, you've done incredibly well. Barbara said, I think you're really unique, Rachel, as you're a person not hidden and accountable, and you're truly accountable for your project. Usually there's no person who can be contacted, so well done. How important do your tenants find that?
They honestly, they love it. So they'll have me go in there. I was just saying to you before, my little girl, she's 13 years old, and on Saturday she wanted to do an arts and crafts session with all the residents. So we've gone in and we were in there for 3 hours. So we're all painting masks. We've got some great photos. We just emulate that family. And, you know, they've got my phone number. And yeah, my staff run the place and run it extremely well. But if there's any issues, the book stops with me, and that's for me to deal with and me to go in. So we split the tenancy enforcement as well. So my staff support the residents. If there's any evictions to do, it's the hostel manager or me to do that. So that way the residents still get the support from the support workers who are their key workers at the time. And, you know, like, as I said, there'll always be issues that come up, but I'm always available to speak to them, or if there's anything in the community that anyone wants to come and talk to me about. But mainly, we just welcome people in. And I even now see my residents showing people around that building just like I would. You know, this is the hub area, and this is our laundry room, and this is our barista machine, and like that. And I just think it's just wonderful.
It genuinely is, and it's a huge asset to yourself and the team and what's been going on there. There's I can see Joe was mentioning in the chat, I'm challenging MPs on homes needing carpets and a cooker, and Nana Essie has said that crockery and cooking pots as well are essential. The next question has come through from Joan. How much help do you give people before and during move on in understanding their tenancy obligations? Do they receive this help from the outreach worker?
Yeah, so that'll be Carla, but also they've still got the key staff in Calderwood House. As I say, they can still come back, have cups of tea. If they move on and they've not got white goods at that point, they can come back, use the laundry room for free. It's no problem. We make it as stress-free as possible. I'm all about breaking down barriers. What is the problem? What are people's fears? Let's talk about them. Let's get them over that. And what we also do is, if someone gets the keys, and it's normally a shell, we'll just take the hit on the housing benefits. So we won't charge rent to that person. They'll pay the rent to the social landlord, and we'll just have a void for a couple of weeks. That's how we see it, while that person slowly moves into their new home. I don't like this project where we've got at the minute where we're just saying to people, right, day one of your tenancy, you're out. Like, that's awful. You know, we need to care about people. And if we want them to keep their tenancies and sustain them, we need to treat people like human beings. And how would we feel if one day we're part of a family in a hostel, and the next day we're just thrown out, you know, like lambs to the slaughter in a property by ourselves with no idea what we're doing? So yeah, so we always give that bit of move on time. And sometimes it's gone on for nearly 6 weeks, but we want to do a job, want to do it properly.
And again, I think that comes from the lived experience side. And when we talked earlier around I think Brian mentioned social housing, the term social, you've mentioned yourself about for profits and things. That's where the biggest challenge comes through, because it's actually understanding that and changing that stigma of people being grateful for having a home. Like, it's you know, it's one of these things where when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, having a home, having a place to live, having a shelter is absolutely essential for growth. And yet there is still a mindset, unfortunately, around some housing providers and some other businesses where, and you've mentioned, you know, you've almost alluded to a couple yourself, where right, we've looked after you for a while, you've got a home now, right, just go sort yourself out, and if you fail, it's your fault, rather than, as you say, looking at it from a human perspective.
No, it's really bad. You know, we put internet into people's houses. We've just put some internet into some circle properties recently because moving asylum seekers into our area with no internet. I mean, surely, like, you know, when we say cooker is like an essential item, so is the internet. How are people supposed to cope? So yeah, we try and set the bar quite high. But I always tell my staff that our residents are our customers. We wouldn't have a job without them. They're our customers, and I'm really proud we've got a 4.4-star Google rating. Our homeless hostel, which I just think is fantastic. So yeah, we're always listening to how we can improve, get better. You know, even our most challenging customers that we have, I like to think that we do our very best for them. And even if you're evicted from Colwood House because you break the rules or whatever, we'll always take you back. So we'll always say, right, come back in 2 weeks, tell us what's changed, and we keep going back and back again. And someone once said to me, well, how many chances do they need? And I said, well, honestly, I had about 7. So, like, you know, how many chances does someone need to be able to learn the ways of the world and to grow? And a lot of these guys just haven't had, you know, the love and the support in their life and the guidance that they needed. So, yeah, so I'm really proud of that as well, that we can just keep going with someone. And every time we get a new referral in, my staff team will go, oh, not again. I'm like, come on, guys, we can do this. Let's bring them in. We can do it. And, you know, we've got some amazing success stories by, you know, just keep bringing people back in again and trying again with them. And once they get it, you know, and they move on, yeah, 9 times out of 10, it works out well.
It's amazing to hear. I mean, there's a point there from Colin. What's the situation regarding work in your area? Do you help residents find work or get into education after work? And I think that's a really interesting point for an area such as yours, because employment options are tough.
Really tough around our area. And when we first opened up, in my mind, I was like, right, they need somewhere to live and like something to do, like a job. But actually, when they come to us, they've been homeless, they're in crisis, they're struggling with addiction, with trauma. And the last thing actually they can do in an emergency homeless hostel is hold down a full-time job. So we scrap that and we say there's something to do. It can be art, it can be allotment work, it can be voluntary stuff, it can be building up family relationships, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be work. Someone comes to us and says, Rach, I'm construction, I just need a job. I've got lots of contacts in construction. But we generally find the best time for them to work is when they've moved on, they've settled into the new home, and then they're ready to commit to work. Because any time that they try and work in our hostel, and we take the financial hit, I don't mind that, they don't seem to sustain it because they've just got so much going on in their life. They've got so much to organise and sort out that's not really a time for them to get into full-time work. That's just been my experience anyway.
And I'm really grateful you brought it to the table, because I think quite often when we hear from speakers at conferences and things like those, and it's usually Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, where there might be plenty more opportunities for work. And I mean, as we were talking before, you know, I grew up in Plymouth, but by the time I graduated university, my mum had relocated to the Lake District. I had a degree, I'd been working for years, I had a car. The best job I could get was working in a bookies. Like there isn't the, and I was driving 15 miles each way for that. There wasn't the options. And so I think it's sometimes about changing that mindset of people going, well, they're homeless and lazy. No, there aren't roles. And yet we're trying to give people the best possible opportunity as well. There's a point from...
You have to be well as well. You have to get well first before committing to long, you know, and like just like my story, I could never hold down a job when I was living in chaos. It was just impossible. I had to get better first.
A point from Chichi in the chat, the point about landlords providing properties that are at least equipped with the basics is important, and this fight must continue to get more of these landlords to behave more responsibly.
Yeah.
Are you or have you been able to tap into social value resources from the local authority supply chain partners? I know our supply chain partners, for example, have helped with the provision of white goods, carpets, paint packs, etc., for those facing vulnerabilities and challenges.
Yep, we have an emergency fund. We've turned over around 50 grand in that in the last few years. And it isn't just Calderwood House ex-residents. If anybody in the local authority, the social prescribers, can ring me and say, look, got this young lass, she's just moved into a flat, she needs a cooker, we just sort it. And our supply chain is really supportive of that. We've just got another £3,500 donation not too long ago. And when they can ring me up, I can say, look, I can put it to Calderwood House running costs or into this emergency fund. What do you want me to do? And 9 times out of 10 they'll go, yeah, if Calderwood House is all right, put it into this emergency pot.
And things like that make more of a difference than people could possibly know unless you've been through it yourself. And as you've mentioned, 7 times it took you to find your journey.
Yeah, at least those are the ones I can remember.
Give people once or twice and go, well, that's it. They're then stigmatized as they're never going to improve. And it's really interesting that, again, I mean, I've touched it a few times, but that lived experience really rings true as to why you know, and how that change can be given. You know, I remember sitting with Spring Housing, you know, I'm on the board for, well, I'm chair of the board for, and we had a really interesting conversation about on our 10th anniversary. A lady came in who said, I just refused to help. So I refused any help. So I was living on the homeless. No, I didn't think I was worth anything. I didn't want anyone working with me. And I kept pushing away. But Spring were persistent and eventually broke down those walls, and we grew that relationship. And that's what it seems like you're trying to do with where you are as well.
I'll always say to my staff and anybody else, engagement's on us. It's not on them, it's on us. And if we can't engage someone, then we need to change the way that we're engaging. So, and that's what I've always thought. We've always just got to try something different to be able to engage with people. I really don't like the cop-out of they won't engage, file closed. You know, they're too hard to reach, too complex, too traumatized. That's just not our experience. If we've got the resources, we've got the trained staff, we can always make sure that we can engage with somebody. And generally that's what we do. The people that come to us are the ones that have failed elsewhere. And we say, right, we're going to give this person a go. We're going to do it all we can. And if it failed, and it can fail, you know, we might have to evict, they might walk out, but we keep going until we can get that right. Yeah, a huge advocate for us changing our tactics, not them changing theirs.
It's amazing to hear. You can see Michael's put in the chat there, the value that quality housing management practices bring cannot be underestimated. And Lauren says your service sounds very person-centered rather than policy void management driven. And that's probably the biggest advocate you could give. Nigel has said, I would suggest everyone join Stop Social Housing Stigma campaign. It's free to join and help stop all social housing stigma, nationwide. And Natalie has put in the chat there, I think a frustration is housing providers sending furniture items to landfill when a property becomes void. And Patrick really liked the phrase, engagement is on us. That piece, you see you nodding away there on housing providers throwing away the furniture, it must be one of the biggest frustrations you face.
And carpets, you know, we've had times when, let's say, we've moved somebody in, put carpets down, and maybe they've passed on or they've moved in with another partner or something, and they just rip them up and send them to landfill. Like, it costs hundreds and hundreds of pounds. There's got to be a different way around, you know, there must be other ways to be able to get around this problem. But yeah, I guess one battle at a time.
Couldn't agree more. We're moving into the last couple of minutes. I mean, firstly, look, a huge thank you to you for coming on, sharing your story so candidly, for continually advocating for and fighting what's been at times a really difficult, like, it's very easy, I think, when you come on and go 20 minutes, yeah, look at the success story, there it is, there's however many years, condensed into 20 minutes, the challenges that you must have faced during that, and the constant battles that must have gone on through some of those times. You can see people are in awe, I think, in terms of being able to take it on. But I think your message, particularly when we sat down before, just a final point really, was this isn't something that should be left with local authorities. It isn't something that just, you know, only special people can do, though actually I advocate for the fact you are. But it's something where you're saying, actually, if you see something that can be done, you've got to step up, because otherwise it isn't going to change. Yeah.
And that's how I would change the community and our society. You know, so many of us, we just like get so fed up with it, and like, you know, you can just drop your head and think, what's the point? But actually, you know, things can change and think good things can come out of it. But it isn't just me though, Matt. Like, there's hundreds of people behind me, around me, my mentors, people holding my hand when I can't cope. I've got a board of directors, absolutely fantastic. My funders, time and time again, I go back to them and say, I think I've got this wrong, can I have some more money? Yes, Rachel, you can. You know, building up those relationships and that trust within our organisation, within our society, West Cumbria, and nationally as well. You know, Tudor Trust, massive supporter of us over the years, National Lottery. So yeah, it can be done, and I just think, like, we've got a model here. How do we roll it out elsewhere? There must be a way, but just I don't think it's my skill set. But you know, it is there. It does work. So.
And as an absolute advocate, and I hope you get some more 5-star reviews from today. I really do.
Yeah, it's only the residents that like do the reviews on the way out.
but that shows, doesn't it? Because that's the voices that matter most.
That does, absolutely, yeah.
As I say, a massive thank you to you for today. A massive thank you to Alertacall for sponsoring today's session. Next week, we welcome Duncan Palmer, who from Head of Responsive Repairs from Platform Housing Group, who's going to be talking about managing those work-in-progress housing repairs in a more conversational piece. He's not coming on with all the answers. He's coming on to open up a conversation. So if you're interested, do join us. But for now, from the Social Housing Roundtable, from Alertacall. A huge thank you to Rachel. Massive luck for the rest of this year and for raising 1.8 million. I don't know how you're going to do it, but if anyone can do it, I firmly believe you can. And if anyone has missed any of today, the session has been recorded and will go up onto our YouTube, Spotify, Apple and Amazon sites over the next couple of days. But Rachel, for now, a huge thank you to you for bringing your story today.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks everyone for listening. My email's in the chat. If you want to get in touch or you want a tour around Colwood House, let me know.
Can you just read out your email for people who are listening in on audio?
Yep, Rachel, RACHEL .Holliday, HOLLIDAY @ttcwestcumbria.org.
Perfect way to end. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone who could join. Bye bye.